Hi, welcome to the Business Class ESL Breakroom. We're a company of passionate language trainers and coaches. We're here to share ideas to improve our skills and strengthen the training community. Come in for some inspiration, leave with tips to apply to your sessions today. Hi, and welcome to the ESL Breakroom. In today's podcast, we'll be looking at the process of learning, and more specifically, certain pain points that learners face, such as lack of motivation, lack of confidence, and blocks from painful past experiences. By looking more closely at how we learn, we're better equipped to address these issues and optimize learning for our trainees. Joining us is mindfulness expert Dave Delaney. Dave is the author of The Mindful Spark, Reclaim Your Past, Reset Your Future, published by Ireland's Liffey Press, and is the Wellness and Community Projects Officer for University College Dublin. Not only does he hold a master's from the University School of Psychology, but he also has one in digital investigation and forensic computing. In addition to academics, Dave has achieved in both music and sport, and in particular, martial arts. So he's been on a lifelong path of learning, which I'm excited to hear more about. So welcome, Dave.
Thank you very much, Sue.
I understand you've spent the last 10 years on quite a bit of a learning journey yourself. Maybe you could share with us a bit more about you and how this path has brought you to here today with us in talking about learning.
Indeed. I suppose I've been quite busy in the last 10 years in that and I set a number of goals that I wanted to achieve. So I worked in IT during the day, but by night I got my first master's from the School of Computer Science in digital investigation and forensic computing. I became a black belt in Taekwondo, became Tai Chi certified instructor. I had a residency in the Hard Rock Cafe playing the guitar, harmonica, and singing. I wrote the book, The Mindful Spark. I got a second master's from the School of Psychology in interventions for depression and pain management. And I developed my own mindfulness system, which I teach in UCD to try and help manage people with their stress, anxiety, and optimize their opportunity to learn. So I work with students on trying to improve what they call or maximize their window of tolerance.
Okay, and you've done all of this in 10 years while holding down a full-time job and being a regular person with a family and a life and eating and sleeping?
Yes.
Amazing. All right, now, so tell us more about this angle of learning and the process of learning. What have you learned about learning?
Well, it was quite a challenge because a lot of the activities I did were very varied and different and required different skills. Mm-hmm. And I suppose the key ways I started to break it down is I first started getting into goal setting. Mm-hmm. Or breaking down what I was going to try and achieve in smaller increments. So I would set a 1 month goal, a 3 month goal, a 6 month goal, a year goal, a 3-year goal. So I was clear in the path where I was trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. Now, it didn't matter to me hugely whether I let go of the outcome. I was more interested in the process of the journey, of how to get there rather than an end point.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be very
shift for you. Sorry, how did that shift things for you? That's interesting.
Often, if we can get anxious about the outcome. So, in rugby terms, Joe Smith was excellent at this in the Irish rugby team and propelled them nearly to be the number one in the world at one point, where he just said, "You worry about your next tackle. Only be concerned with your next tackle. Only be concerned with your next pass. Only be concerned with your next position. And if you do those things right, everything else will fall into place. The outcome will happen. And all you can do is the best that you can with the controllables that you have. You don't waste your time or effort or energy being concerned, because often when we project into the future, we have layers of anxiety and stress. But we can cope. It's easier to cope with what am I trying to do this week? What am I trying to do this month? What am I trying to do in the next 3 months? And again, it's being okay with failure. It's saying, okay, did I miss that? Why? What can I learn from the experience? Because often we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes.
Absolutely.
And that took a lot of anxiety out of the system.
Mm-hmm.
And wasted energy.
Absolutely. I have to agree. And in the learning setting with our trainees, I often say they get embarrassed when they make mistakes. And I like to say, this is where you're supposed to. This is where you learn. This is our safe lab. Yeah.
If you're not failing, you're not trying, you're not pushing the envelope.
Mm-hmm.
It's good.
Absolutely. So yeah, nugget number 1, mistakes are totally good. Shows we're trying.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, may I ask you, specifically, for example, the pain point that some of our learners face is kind of lack of motivation. We have these people in front of us who don't seem like they really want to be there. What would you say about that?
Yeah, motivation can often be a big factor in learning, because if we aren't motivated in some way, if it doesn't have meaning for us, then our brain prioritizes it in a much lower level.
Mm-hmm.
So when we can make it real for people, then it has more meaning, and therefore it has a higher priority.
Right.
And it can be easier sometimes. So if we think we have to learn something because somebody else told us, maybe it has less value. But when we can say this is really good for integrating your brain, actually learning a new language will create new thing called neurogenesis. So new brain cells will actually be developed. This gives you a greater capacity to integrate your brain. So it's a really good way of making your own brain healthier. It's a really good way of getting you maybe to share your learning experience with other people. So at the minute, my daughter is learning French. She's got 1.5 years left of school before she goes to college. And one of the things I suggest that she does is, I said, okay, if you're going to learn French once a week, you sit down and you teach me what you learned this week. Because when we have to teach something, that's when we find out the real gaps in our knowledge, mm-hmm. and the real spaces where we could improve. Yeah. But it also, the way memory works is it's this 3-part to memory. We encode a memory, it's then consolidated, and then it's the retrieval process. We remember what we have in memory. Mm-hmm. And when we have to teach, that we get to do those cycles again and revalue it, because when we have to put it in terms with somebody else, we have to understand it ourselves. So that's a great way of learning as part of the learning cycle. So even if you're learning, if your learners are learning a language, maybe they can share that with their children.
Yeah,
with their friends, yeah. And then it has meaning, and there's their motivation. Not that you have to learn it for your job, but you can learn it to help your children, or relate to your partner, or have fun with your friends speaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's providing a hook that makes it have value for them is very important, and that's why a big process of the learning is identifying where the learner is at. And it's not just a script that we follow and it's the same for everybody. It's not. When we can understand where the other person's at and meet them there, the outcome of the learning is more likely to be much more effective.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, may I ask, often we get, learners who just have a lack of confidence. They just don't feel that they have it in them to use language. They use failure language, like I can't, I'm not good at languages. What would you say to that?
Yeah, and it's interesting the way the brain works. The people are often in two states. They're in a hypo or a hyper state. And when people are in that hypo state, where they're in the nearly fight, flight, flop, or freeze state, they can be a bit lethargic, they can be disconnected, and they can be maybe leaning a bit on the negative. So great ways to bring people out of that is laughter, is being silly, is fun. And it's also being able to be okay joking with ourselves and tell us, maybe get a chance to tell a story where you show your own vulnerabilities, that it's okay to have these feelings. And that gives, again, it's this window of tolerance, this optimum place, the homeostasis place in the body where it's most open to learning. And when we can energize our learners in that way of sharing something with them, that provides oxytocin, which will create a connection. When we tell a story maybe about ourselves and when we struggled or something funny that happened to us, if you can get somebody to laugh, they will become open. And when they're open, they're much more likely to learn.
Absolutely. I think that makes me think of when I dare to be vulnerable enough to show them that my French, for example, I'm training here in France. My French is not always perfect, and I might need to use it in front of them for some reason or other, and they see it, and then they kind of go, oh, okay. But if I own that and say, okay, but I'm doing my best, and here we all are, it seems to help them loosen up, as you say.
And learning in life is the same thing. When we can learn to know that it's okay to be good enough, that we don't have to be perfect. That's, perception is also always often considered a problem, in the sense that if we don't think it's perfect, then we let go of everything. And it's not true. It's if your English or French or whatever language has improved, say from 1 to 100, if last week it was 20 and now it's 21, then you're going in the right direction. Yeah. It doesn't have to be at 100%. And when we're comfortable with that, again, the stress levels and anxiety levels come down, and the openness to learn is expanded. So fun, if you can play games, if you've got younger learners, you can do breathing techniques that help get them activated. You can do something silly that they don't expect and get them to laugh. That can be really helpful.
Absolutely. I just to share with our trainers, I do that. The typical thing that a lot of French speakers do is they forget the S on the end of third person singular. He plays guitar. They'll say he play guitar. And I take a yellow sticky, I put an S on it, and I just stick it on my nose or my forehead. And I'm just there in the camera, and I don't say anything after, because I've corrected them before. So all I do is just do weird things with the S, and they crack up. But a lot of them have said, I won't forget the S now.
So. And what a brilliance, because again, the way the encoding works is like the brain is not one object. There are lots of neural components in the brain that work together or separate, but are integrated for us to learn. And one aspect is the audible component, where we take in, we listen, we hear. But another part of learning, and it's very valuable for many people, is the visual. And what you've created is an image. So you've explained to them about the S, so they've taken it in audibly. But then you have presented an image to them, which now has doubled their memory location. So they have an image to it, and they have the audible, and they make that connection, and that enhances their ability to remember that.
Yeah.
And because it's funny as well, that gives a humor, that gives a higher priority, and their memory will get a higher priority, which will allow them to remember it for longer.
great. What I love about this conversation is just giving us permission to have fun in class and to
Yes.
bring humor into it. I think as adults, we somehow need that permission to do that.
But you set the tone as the trainer.
Mm-hmm.
You're setting the tone for the environment. And no matter what group circumstances we're in, if you can set a safe container where people feel comfortable and can express themselves, then it creates an opportunity for the group to learn if it's a group scenario, or if it's a one-on-one, the same principle applies.
Yeah.
If you're calm, if you're relaxed, if you're open, if you're okay with vulnerability, then your learner will be too.
It is very true. Now, the third pain point I'd like to bring up with you is another common theme. Blocks. People come to us and say, my teacher in high school was nasty, or told me I'd never be able to, string a sentence together. And, it's very painful for us to hear that and to see that, because we see that some of it, 20 years later, these people are carrying this pain with them, and it's blocking them from learning. What would you say to that?
Well, I'd say that's great, because it ties into my book. As you said, it's the mindful spark: reclaim your past to reset your future. So when we can help people to look back on events that happened in the past, but slightly alter the emotional value they have on it, it can free them from the experience. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if I came onto this podcast this morning and I was giving out and I was saying trainers are all stupid, and I was just irritable and offensive and unhelpful, you might go away from the podcast upset and angry, going, I wasted my time, and that guy showed no respect and was rude, and it was no use whatsoever. And you could be very angry then for the rest of the day, or could upset you, or could stay with you. But if you were to learn that maybe something had happened to me, maybe I lost my job, or maybe I found out somebody who was close to me wasn't well, or something happened, and you can look back and you can go, now I understand possibly why that person behaved in that way. And you can have a bit of compassion or empathy. You can change the emotional context you apply to the memory. So even though the history is exactly the same, how you view it has changed. Mm-hmm. And when we can help our learners to understand that happy people try and real leadership is about bringing people with us, showing their potential and helping them to cultivate that to its maximum. And if we value people who are maybe hurt or damaged or trying to put us down, including ourselves, and we're often the worst person to do that, when we can start looking at that and going, no, I'm not going to prioritize that negativity. I'm going to be my own leader, or I'm going to follow people who genuinely have my interest at heart. But from a trainer point of view, we can often see this in how people use their language. So they might say, I'm not the type of person that can learn languages, or this English is very hard, or French it's too hard. Or we can get them to change their language and say, well, hang on a second. You're speaking whatever language they speak, French, so you can learn a language.
Yeah. You can
say, okay, how about changing it from this is too hard to this is quite a challenge for me? And what you're doing is you're taking away their failure strategy. It's okay for me not to be able to do this because. And you're changing it to go, now it's a challenge. Now it's an opportunity to try. Yeah, it could be challenging. It could be difficult. But that's okay. Often, as Oscar Wilde would say, the best things that are learned can't be taught. We have to experience them. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the reframe on these past experiences, and maybe looking at that. Maybe that was a school teacher or somebody who really hurt you, and just go, who I wonder what they were dealing with at that time. and
what it does is it changes the context of how we. So remember I was saying that memory has the three elements to it. So the encoding, the consolidation, and the recall. Mm-hmm. So the way memory works is each time we recall the memory, the emotion and the place we're in at the moment, at the time we recall it, will actually have an impact when the memory is put back and consolidated. It can alter its effect. So in the book, I talk about, if you imagine your right fist, you lift up your right hand in front of you and make it into a fist. And you place your left hand over the fist as if you're capping it. So it's locking in the right fist is the memory, and the left hand, which is overlaying your right fist, is locking it in. That's the emotion. And when we can alter the emotion, we can allow the left hand to become freer and move away from the right hand, and then the fist can open. It's no longer trapped. We're no longer locked in. So even though the history is the same, how we look at it is different. How we recall and then consolidate it and put it back, it lessens its impact on us in a negative way.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I love that. Dave, this has been so helpful and very interesting as a topic in general. Now, you've learned many, many things in the last 10 years. Have you yourself experienced these kind of challenges? Perhaps you want to share.
Yes, I think I learned that, as I was saying, the goal setting was really important. That really had the biggest impact on me. And also then the motivation. So how I was able to prioritize what I was learning. Why was I doing it? So say, particularly in the last 5 years, I was looking at changing careers. Mm-hmm. So as I started learning and realized that it would be helpful if I developed my own mindfulness system, or if I wrote a book, or if I got the master's from the School of Psychology, they would have left those components would work together to allow me to change careers. Mm-hmm. And I moved out of IT, and I'm now the Wellness and Community Projects Officer in UCD. Now I can start applying a lot of what I learned to the students and help them in their academic career. So I suppose the key takeaway points and expand how my understanding advanced was the goal setting, mm-hmm. the prioritization. So giving it value. How do I make this real? How do I make this meaningful? It's not just I'm learning for the sake of learning. I'm not just doing this for my boss. So this is going to change my life, improve my life, make it better. And even the process of the journey, even if I don't get to change the job, even how I'm going about to get to that point will improve my life. So as Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching said, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. We just take one step and then the next step and the next step. And when we can focus on those smaller components, so in complex system theory, you might look at something that's very complicated, but you try and break it down to its simplest points. What's the next thing I need to do? Your goal setting, your value, this is adding to my life, so therefore it has meaning. And from a memory point of view, so say from learning a language in this context that we're talking about, when people can apply what they're doing to things they already know, it can be really helpful for students to try and remember. So if you're talking about a family situation, get them to close their eyes. And when they're going through like day-to-day conversation, get them to see their grandmother. They're having a conversation with their grandmother or their mother or their best friend or someone they care about. Then there's an emotional connection to it. And therefore the learning will have higher priority. So how do we make it real for the learner? So part of my journey was I made it real for myself. Like in the Taekwondo, I was doing it with my daughter. So I loved learning it so then I could help her develop. So it had added meaning to me.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just for myself. So when we can apply meaning, so again, in a language context, it can be really good. Again, I'm using my daughter as an example. She's a singer. So say if she's learning French at the moment, it's encouraging to learn French songs because she learns those by osmosis. They just absorb it. There's no effort in it because she loves singing.
Yeah.
So therefore she can expand her French vocabulary
Mm-hmm.
and her French and different wording by learning songs that is easy. She doesn't see that as study. She doesn't see that's fun time.
Yeah.
So how do we make it fun? How do we give it things meaning? How do we set minor goals? So we're just raising the priority of it. And another big aspect is context. So the way the brain works is we like to know what's happening, and we often can categorize things. So I'm talking to Sue Nally now. She is helping me with French. This is where I learn French. Once I hit the end button on the Zoom call, now that's over and I'm doing something else in my life. So now we're categorizing the learning of the language down to a tiny little space, but it's also external. It's Sue Nally is teaching me, is training me. So she's the trainer, I'm the learner. But if we can change that context to go, no, at this moment, the trainer is assisting me in learning a language that I want to learn. But maybe if you can get them through the day to say, okay, you want to pick 3 or 4 things that you say in your own native tongue, and then say, I wonder what it'd be like to be able to say that in French or German or whatever language you want.
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly language, it isn't just that tiny learning space. And it isn't something's happening to me, an external trainer is teaching me. No, I'm learning and they're assisting me, and there you have responsibility. And that's a huge factor and ties in with motivation, and it ties in with with confidence levels. Absolutely. So how do we get the learner to take responsibility? And often we need to be able to give them confidence. And that's where we were talking about being good enough. And we were talking about don't worry about perfection. Mm-hmm. It's trying your best. And that's the most important thing.
Progress, not perfection. And I do think 85% of our job or more is assisting with confidence, truly.
Absolutely. But it's empowering the learner that this is their journey. You're just a piece of their puzzle. Mm-hmm. And when they can bring it into their everyday life. So again, relating to my daughter, she journals. So she'd often write down what has happened to her during the day, her experiences the day. And the suggestion was, because a lot of the scientific findings and research is that if you actually write with a pen, the process of that actually, when the brain is consolidating the memory, it's deeper. We remember more when we write with a pen than when we type.
Interesting.
And there seems to be an emotional connection to it too. So it's the physiological movement of the writing, as well as the looking at it and the processing and thinking about it. So it's not something that's just happening. She's got to think about it. So she translates now. One day she'll do her journal in French, and the other day she'll do it maybe in Irish, which you have to learn for her exams, Gaelic. So now that process has the writing, which is very good for memory. Mm-hmm. It has her emotional context and meaning because this is her own life. This is her journal, which she loves to do. Absolutely. It makes the French real because now it's becoming part of her day. And it's not just something I have to learn. It's not an external thing being posed on her. It's an internal thing that she's choosing to do. Mm-hmm. And that consolidates the memory.
That's an excellent suggestion. I think I'm going to use that with your permission for certain learners who might be disposed to writing in a journal for themselves. I'll make that suggestion. It's fantastic. Excellent, Dave. Well, thank you so much. I can just imagine with the path you've been on, the Taekwondo, the Tai Chi, the masters, the changing jobs. You must have bumped up against some big struggles. And I don't know if you'd like to share just what would be your own personal piece of advice, or share your own.
I suppose for me, the interesting thing is I'm blind, so I only have 2% eyesight, maybe 3% eyesight. It's so small it can't really be measured, and I have a guide dog. So for me, the prioritization, the value of learning was in some ways showing that I could do this. I am as good as everybody else. And that was a big driving factor in my desire to learn. Now, as I matured, now I started to do things, not because I felt I had to prove myself, but because I was interested in the learning. Mm-hmm. But no matter what was driving me, there was a value to the learning, to the outcome. And that was really helpful. But also just, I had to be more efficient and effective in my learning because I couldn't read anything. I can't read any text. So I had to maybe understand how the brain worked to optimize it as best I could. So your example of the visualization of the S on your nose on the sticky pad was brilliant. And that's what I would have used a lot of. I would listen audibly to notes and to lectures and things, and then I would have tried to create an image or a little video. I'd make up a story for myself. So the Greeks used to use this called memory palaces. And most of the world champion memory people use this as a really good way of remembering something. So you can go through your house, so something that you already know, and apply what you're trying to learn on top of that means that the most of the memory is already there. So the imagery part of it's already there. So it was all learning these little tools and techniques to assist me, because it was quite a challenge.
My goodness. I can't imagine. I can't imagine trying to do a master's and work on screens and do all of this. And so hats off to you for all that you've achieved. Truly quite an achievement. And it shows us, it gives us all that great example that we can, we can, no matter what we're struggling with.
And that's the beauty. We talked about vulnerability earlier on. In my new role, I now can go into the learners and say, I've done it. Yeah. And I'm blind. The only thing that's stopping you is your own self-belief. Mm-hmm. And if I can do it, you can do it. And then it becomes very powerful. And my vulnerability is very much to the fore.
In the service of, a greater.
Yeah. So now, whereas in the IT, it might have been more of a vulnerability, where now I'm using my challenges as a point of inspiration and motivation.
That they are, Dave, really, truly. Well, I thank you so much for your time today, and we all thank you. I think this is going to really help our trainers, rethink how they approach certain issues in the training session. So thanks a million, and we hope to bring you back if we may, if you're open to that, because I know you have a lot of other tools you could share with us for some other aspects of training. Would you be open to that?
I'd be delighted. Absolutely. Love to.
Excellent. All right, Dave, we'll see you again soon then. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Sue.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us in the Business Class ESL Breakroom, the podcast designed to bring business English trainers useful ideas, inspiration, and conversation that motivates. Follow us on Instagram at business_class_language and subscribe to the ESL Breakroom playlist on Spotify, Deezer, or Apple Music for new episodes. See you next time.